Hello and welcome to this episode of Star Wars Universe Podcast. My friends, the night we are recording this, we are 7 days away from a new Star Wars show coming out, Andor. And Paul and myself are going to give you a primer episode, a kind of like breakdown of what we love about the character and this period of time in history, of Star Wars history, and why we're excited about the show, and then maybe some things we're not so excited about, and just kind of talk about the show. Here's the thing, though. There's a lot of great content, including by a lot of my mutuals, that has been breaking down the previews, talking about the news from set, talking about the casting, talking about all sorts of stuff. Paul and I have decided that we enjoy things a lot more if we basically go in through the veil of ignorance, which is basically just a fancy way of saying we hate being spoiled. And Paul has sort of been on this church for a long time. Paul has converted me to this church. Paul adamantly hates religion, and I have to laugh that he's basically the reason I went to seminary, so that's why I'm joking about him converting me to a church. But anyway, the point being, we're going to talk about it as though all we know, because it is all we know, is, the fact that this show is coming, the little bit of news that came out of the show at the very beginning, and of course the character and what we know about this time in Star Wars history, such as it is. So if you are like us and we've brought you around to the team of no spoilers, then this is a great primer for you. If you have all the spoilers, you can be like, ha ha, these guys are idiots. If only they knew that this had happened. And, have your fun with that. Only rule is, if you're watching this on live stream, do not post spoilers in the chat. And if you watch this later, you will be banned, and please do not post any of those spoilers as a response to this until the show actually begins, at which point you can email them to me at theethicalpanda, Matthew at theethicalpanda.com, but please don't post any spoilers. So if, something cool is going to happen, but it hasn't happened yet, even though you saw it in the previews, please don't hit us with it. This is also to kick off our Andor coverage. We're going to be doing we're going to be doing response episodes to every episode of Andor as it comes out. I will certainly be doing them. We're going to be trying to get a couple of other guests on to do them from time to time. Paul is going to do them for as long as the show doesn't annoy them. That might be the whole show. It might be after the first episode. We will see. It's a fun game. Come along and play along.
We should have a betting pool.
We could have a betting pool. That'd be interesting.
Like how many episodes?
Someone who's in Vegas, you can organize that for us. Or somewhere else where it's legal. It's probably legal everywhere. Who cares? But in case any FBI agents are listening to this, I'm glad you are. You're probably doing better things listening to us than you would be out FBIing. So yeah, listen to us more. Anyway, this is now, last time we had one of the longest end of an episode that turned into a whole episode. This is now officially the longest beginning of an episode. So the last thing I will say is that we will not only be recording the episodes, we'll be live recording them on stream, on Twitch stream every Wednesday night, 8:30 Eastern, 7:30 Central, 6:30 Mountain, 5:30 Pacific, and on twitch.tv/ZenMadman. All that will be in the show notes. Paul, do you have any other last words before we cut to commercial break?
I thought we were wrapping up the podcast. That felt like a full thing.
No, we're only 4 minutes in. We got a ways.
Yeah, I had something, but I forgot it already.
That's fair. We will have another top 3 list as our stinger. It will not cause another episode. I'm putting my foot down on that now. But now we're going to go to a commercial break that probably Grand Moff Tarkin's in control of because he's pretty well set. Welcome back. I'm Matthew, your host. I'm joined by our not co-host, Paul Hoppy. Paul, you're the one who really got me on board with the whole, just avoid all trailers kind of thing. Where did that start for you? How are you feeling about having this episode as a primer about something we know almost nothing about?
I'm curious to see how this episode, that I think can't possibly last more than 20 minutes, will last an hour and 20 minutes. I guess we'll find out. We'll go on that adventure together. I really do enjoy watching things without knowing what's going to happen, at least the first time through. Yeah. And I think especially for a show like this, which basically I will sum up what I really know about it. I know that the title character is Cassian Andor, who is one of the central characters in Rogue One. I know that this therefore must be a prequel because, spoilers for Rogue One, not a lot of story after that. I know that...
Because as we've seen in the Star Wars universe, no one comes back from the dead.
Yeah, well, I mean, they don't generally, it doesn't... They're mostly Sith. It's mostly Sith who come back from the dead. And I mean, he shot that one guy in the back. But I do know that the showrunner is a writer that I really enjoy, who wrote the first several Bourne movies, but not the last terrible one. So, that seems good. Who also was a writer and essentially a re-director, I think, on Rogue One, which is,
nice.
I think, one of the best. It's Tony Gilroy, right? I think one of the best Star Wars movies. Arguably the best in terms of just, like, how it is fashioned as a film,
Yeah, it is not my favorite, but I think, like, from a technical, like, filmmaking point of view, it's probably the best, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I in terms of the writing and stuff, like, I actually started rewatching. I'm like, and I'm like, okay, I will not tread down that dark path because forever will it, dominate my destiny or something like that. But yeah, it is a very well made movie, and I enjoyed it a lot as well the first several times I saw it, and I think that this is supposedly has some sort of spy-ish type take. Although, I mean, we know when it takes place, right? That it's sometime before the blowing up of the Death Star. So sometime during the rebellion. So the extent to which it is the kind of birth of the rebellion or whether it's the rebellion more in full swing, I don't know. I will find out, But, I'm looking forward to kind of seeing, all right, how do you do a show like this that presumably is going to be fairly different from the other things you've done so far on screen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's great. I want to talk about the show itself, but first we're talking about the non-spoiler thing. It's funny because the thing that convinced me to stop watching trailers because they were negatively impacting my view of the movies or the TV shows was Rogue One. Because because we all know that Rogue One had like an initial feel, and then they kind of brought in, as you said, new directors and editors and writers and changed the feel of it a lot. And I think, I haven't seen the original cut, but I think they did I really like what they came up with. So I'm not sad about that. I'm not clamoring for the original cut by any means. Excuse me. But the first trailer included a line that I just thought was fantastic. And it was like someone like Mon Mothma or someone else like that asks, Jin, why are you like breaking the rules or whatever, something along those lines. And she just looks at her and says, this is a rebellion, right? I rebel. And I loved that line and I was so excited for it. And I spent a small part of my brain, the entire movie of Rogue One was focused on when is that line going to happen? And then it didn't. And looking back, it probably would have been a little bit too silly for the tone that this was going for. But the preview had set me up for something. And so after that, I was just like, no more. Check. Sorry, wrong podcast. That's about Rounders. But yeah, I was just like, we're not doing this anymore. And I found that I enjoy shows so much more this way because especially in something like Star Wars where I think this is I think a lot of this came out for me during Kenobi, to be honest. I have headcanoned already my understanding of what Obi-Wan meant, what Obi-Wan and Vader meant when they said, we meet again, the circle is now complete, etc.
Right.
And the Kenobi show didn't fit into my understanding of it. And in part because things I saw in the Kenobi trailers made me feel like, I don't, and I found that like giving that up, I did see a little of the trailers, but only the first, and then I stopped watching any of them. And I heard later about how much discussion there was about like, oh, we see them fighting this time and this time. And I think I'm so glad that I didn't see that because it would have, it's one thing to see trailers about a movie, set in a world that I know nothing about, because then I sort of feel like I don't have anything to hang them on.
Right.
But especially in something like Star Wars or the MCU, you give me a couple of like 2-second scenes, my brain is going to create the rest around them. And I don't want to do that. Yeah. I want to go in with as few preconceived notions as possible.
Yeah, to me, there's no greater way to set up disappointment than to build expectations, first of all.
Yeah.
right? Second of all, I really don't enjoy the feeling watching something knowing something particular is going to happen, not necessarily knowing exactly how or why, but just like I'm going to use Angel as an example. I had seen an episode of Angel season maybe 3 or 4 years before I saw any of Buffy or Angel, like for real, right? So then I ended up watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I started watching Angel. And like the entire first like 2.5 seasons, I'm waiting for this particular scene. And then I see it and I'm like, oh, there's that scene that I saw that one time when I was at a casino. Like, and it's so weird just having this like this little bit of knowledge that's like totally from the wrong part of the story. And, you know, you can tell a story in a nonlinear fashion and do that very deliberately. But when it's just some random thing that you've seen, you know, I feel like it very much messes with the experience for me. And I much prefer to see, you know, the story as the writer, you know, or writers or whoever's kind of built the story, maybe, you know, in film and TV, it's usually very collaborative, but I like to see it in the way they intended and, you know, and not have a whole bunch of expectations for what's going to happen and not be like, when's that line? When's she going to say it? When's she going to say it? You know?
Right.
You know? And
when are they going to kiss? Because if there's a kiss in the movie or TV show, they always will show it.
Right.
In some way or another.
And that's like that, you know, aside from just being a spoiler in terms of like, now you know what's going to happen and then there's not, you know, suspense or a question of that. It's just, to me, it feels like not experiencing, you know, the thing in its, not really experiencing it like it's new, like it's fresh. Right. And that's one of the things I like about this is, so far, I only know it as one character that I know from one movie, right? And so I imagine there will be cameos. I mean, I know what time period this takes place in. I can think of a dozen people who might show up, right?
Right.
I'm looking forward to those being surprises, but also I'm looking forward to not sitting there and waiting for those things to happen, you know?
Yeah.
And just like let it come when it comes.
Yeah, I think it's really true. I also think we're mostly going to kind of stop and look at the chat at later points, but because you were just talking about Buffy, and Buffy Bot has now helpfully chimed into the chat, Buffy Bot writes, the only thing worse than watching a trailer before seeing a movie is reading a review of that movie. I had to stop myself from doing that entirely. And it's a problem, especially because now reviews have been weaponized, you know, and like we have people who are, you know, dropping negative reviews about things even before they come out. And like, there's just so much. To me, the unfortunate part of it, and this is a whole other discussion we can get into, and I want to get to Rogue One, but is, you know, so much of social media now about things can become dedicated to that. And I do want to make clear, if you're someone, I think this is how me and Paul see things. And I know other people have said they see it that way, and I appreciate that. One person in the chat just chimed in, and I'll get your comment in a little bit. But I can also totally understand why watching trailers, why you love it. You know, I think it can build anticipation. It can sort of be a way to like, I can't wait 6 months. I need to know something more. I want to know about the casting. I want to know the interview of the director. And, oh, this actor made this joke in a tweet, and so maybe that means something. Let's talk about it and talk about it and talk about it. And if that's your thing, that's awesome. We're not saying that we're doing it the right way. It's just that's not how we want to do it. And so that's why we're doing this a little bit different.
That's not what Matthew's saying.
Paul just thinks you're wrong, but Paul thinks 99% of us are wrong most of the time anyway.
That is accurate. I do think I will read reviews of a movie after I see it sometimes. Particularly if I liked it, or if there's like something that like I had certain thoughts about, I might be like, I wonder if anybody kind of has a take on this particular aspect of a thing. But like, I don't want to go in thinking that, you know, I want to give everything its fair shot and then, you know, go from there basically. I do. So do you want to read what TJ Stafford said also?
Yeah, I was going to get to that before we wrap up the, which by the way, you were afraid that we weren't going to have anything to talk about.
Yeah.
We've now spent 10 minutes just on the fact that this is not spoilers without saying a word about Andor. We're going to be fine. TJ Stafford said, I'd like it so much better if they didn't put out so many trailers. But if they are released, I don't have enough self-control not to watch them. So just don't put them out. LOL.
Word.
Yeah, I'm with you. It took a lot of restraint for me not to watch them. And every now and then I'll like, I'll see one pop up on my TikTok and I'll be like a second or two slow because I'm like, oh, this looks... No, close it. I have to close it. You know, and it's hard. And so, like, I probably know a lot more about the movie than Paul does. Just also because I'm on TikTok and all that kind of stuff, and Twitter and the like. So, but I'm going to keep what I know out of it. And I think we both don't know too much. And yeah, I agree with you. I think I don't mind trailers in movie. Like, well...
Oh, like
that's a whole other
conversation.
conversation.
The previews
We're going to get into it at a different point. Yeah.
That's like a very particular experience that at some point in time I used to like, you know?
Yeah. When it was a totally... Anyway, let's actually talk about... Well, go ahead if you have one last thing.
I just wanted to respond to this. I remember Daredevil Season 2 had a trailer that was basically just a few shots from Season 1 in this kind of like stained glass window motif. And it just, that to me was the perfect, like, oh yeah, this show. I want to watch this show again. Yeah. Without like telling you anything about what was going to happen. It was just like, yeah, you're going to watch this show again. It's going to be great. And it's like, okay, great.
Yeah.
You know? And to me, I do understand that, like, kind of, you know, getting psyched to watch something. And, I mean, I think a trailer can be a piece of art. Like, honestly, I think the trailers for the first Suicide Squad movie were better than like 90% of movies that are released. Like those trailers were just amazing, you know, and very different from one another as well. You know, the movie wasn't as good as the trailers. It wasn't like The Saint, where I saw the trailer for The Saint and I was like, oh, this looks great. And then I was like, this is one of the worst movies I've ever seen, you know? But yeah, it's rough, you know, they're everywhere too. It's like, if you watch YouTube with ads, it's like, boom, here's a trailer, you know, you go to turn anything on and it's like, just trying to show you trailers. It's like, no, stop it. Like, I think it was like Disney Plus was like trying to show me trailers for something I was specifically trying not to watch trailers for. And I'm like, come on. And, you know, and I knew some of the characters that showed up in Obi-Wan that I was like, I don't know, I think I might have been excited to see them if I didn't know they were going to be in it. And then, like, I knew, and, like, by the time I saw them, I was like, I don't know, I'm not feeling it. But if it was like, oh, wow, you know, it's an experience you can't give back once you've taken it.
Can you imagine if we didn't know that Hayden was going to be in Obi-Wan?
Right?
Yeah, like, I think that would have made it a million times better.
Yeah, but, for sure.
Anyway, so, yeah, I love, actually a good transition, because I would say I love that kind of a trailer where it is just shots from the old thing. And I think, to me, if you did that, and again, I don't know anything actually about the movie, the show, but I think this is a pretty fair guess. To me, one of the lines that sticks out so much as like definitional of who Cassian Andor is the shooting of the guy, which we'll talk about, but also is the line, you know, not all of us have dirty hands. You know, we're basically talking to Jin about how rebellions aren't pure wars, because I have to imagine that's a lot of what this show is going to be about. And so let's kind of just start with there. Like, well, actually, let's start with Cassian Andor himself. Like, what's your kind of take on this character?
I mean, I don't have that much of a take. I feel like it's a very good portrayal of a character that you don't ever really get a backstory on, right? Like, he's got one other line that stood out to me, which is something along the lines of like, we all lost someone, you know? Yeah. Like, and to me, that's kind of the idea, is like, you don't have to tell someone like who it was or whatever. It's like, there's some shared trauma and some shared, like, you know, desire for revenge and desire for changing things. Right. And it's like, you can kind of understand, it's like, yeah, you know, we've been living under the Empire's thumb for a long time, you know, for 20 years by that point, basically, right? So I think it's, you know, there's an understanding that, like, this is a character who had some sort of a life at some point, lost some person or people that he cared about a lot, and decided that he wanted to help change things, and was willing to do basically anything to do that, you know? And, like, that's pretty much all you know about the character, you know? I mean, you know, like, also that, like, he's charismatic and, like, kind of smart, but not, like, necessarily, like, a brilliant tactician who, like, stands out that way. But kind of is the, like, you know, just, like, willing to do what it takes to get things done. Yeah.
I think that's my take on him as well, and I'll get to that's why I'm excited about the show, but you know, to me, the real definitional moment for his character, and I'm glad they give it to us so early, is when he shoots the basically understand like another like one of his contacts is a spy, but clearly someone who is working to help the rebellion.
Yeah.
And it's a really jarring moment because you don't see him like agonizing about it. You don't see him like. I think that was one of the and again, like if I'd seen that in a trailer, I'd be so angry. I think that was one of the times I was most genuinely surprised in a movie theater in the last 5-10 years or so, because it was just, I would never like if this was a Bourne movie, I would maybe expect that, you know, but not in a Star Wars thing, because Star Wars has always been, you know, fairly clear lines about who is good and who is evil. We literally have the light and dark sides of the Force.
Right.
And, you know, and so the idea that, like, no, you can, that even fighting a rebellion, I'll back up here in a second, but it connects. One thing I noticed in media a lot when I was growing up was that there were movies about World War II in which you never really saw blood and guts. The movies were all, war is great and grand, and look at how wonderful the American soldiers are, and look at how terrible the Nazis or the Japanese are, and this is all glorious and good. In Vietnam, though, wounds were bloody.
Right.
Like, it was just sort of like, because the war isn't morally pure in American understanding, with lots and lots of quotation marks about that. And then Saving Private Ryan came out, and part of why I was so into that movie, the last 5 minutes notwithstanding, is because it showed, you know, Americans charging the beaches at Normandy and guts hanging out. And like, not that I like blood and gore, but just like showed that it was messy, showed that it was ugly, and showed Americans doing terrible things that they felt they had to. In some cases, like, yeah, war is terrible and that's what you have to do. In some cases, like, yeah, Americans committed war crimes. And I think I have just been in love with the character of Andor ever since he shot that guy, because, like, on an objective level, well, if there, I think this is the point, that there is no objective kind of idea of ethics, but if you take it out of its context, shooting your ally in the back so that you can escape seems horrible. It seems like everything that a rebellion is supposed to be against. But when it's, this person's injured, they're not going to be able to escape, and it's not just your life on the line, but if you don't get your secret out, it's possible that, like, the really, really bad thing is going to happen. It becomes like, yeah, I don't want to ever think I would have to do that, but maybe, like, I don't think, if he does that, I think the Empire wins, because they don't know how to blow up the Death Star. So yeah, to me, that's my biggest take on the character, is that he's the one who's going to really, we're going to get a completely different picture of the rebellion because of who Cassian is.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think so. First of all, there's an almost identical scene in another show that I don't want to spoil, even though it's like 15, 16 years old, that maybe we will cover at some point on superhero ethics. Okay. But it's a character who is a spy and is doing a thing, and somebody's trying to help them, and I think it even involves like climbing up or down a fire escape, and that person's maybe injured, and they're just like, oh, this person's maybe gonna like spoil the thing, you know?
Yeah.
So they just shoot them. And like, it was like, oh, that's what that character would do. And so I think the way you were just talking about it actually almost like makes it more black and white than I would say it is fair. Even, you know, which is like, I don't believe that the Empire's necessarily going to win if he doesn't shoot that guy, but I believe that he believes it, you know?
Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it.
And that's the thing, is that it's a judgment call, and it's like, you know, I mean, shooting someone, shooting them in the back, I think is probably better than shooting them in the front, because, you know, they don't know. They don't know. It's just, you know, it's just, it seems that when people get blasted, they either die instantaneously or they're fine. Those seem to be the two outcomes, right? Because what's his name? I just forgot his name, but I was remembering it earlier. But the guy in the white shawl.
Krennic?
Yeah, Krennic.
Oh, yeah.
I know it's not actually a shawl, but it looks kind of like a shawl.
Yeah, him and Cassian both get shot
in
that like last final set of scenes, and then are like wounded a
bit.
No,
but in the beginning, Krennic gets shot too by.
Oh yeah, he gets shot in the arm
by her mom. Yeah, and he's just like fine. He's like, oh, ouch, you know what I mean? And and it's like, or you blast someone once and they're just like instantly dead. You know, there's not usually a lot of, oh, I've been shot, I'm dying. You know, it's just like, it seems binary, but that was one of my things actually, like rewatching, and I was like, But like, whatever. That's not.
Yeah.
We won't go down that path.
Were you fairly surprised in the theater? Do you remember when Cassian shot him?
No. I have no memory of being surprised. I didn't know who he was really yet.
Right.
You know. I think that was really. Was that before? Yeah, that was before I really knew who like Diego Luna was. I think I'd seen him like Casa de mi Padre, which is the Will Ferrell movie that's entirely in Spanish, even though Will Ferrell doesn't speak Spanish.
Oh yeah, I remember.
And
that.
I feel like, does he play his brother? I could be entirely making this up, but I'm gonna have to like look it up. But yeah, I was like, I didn't really know anything about the character yet, so I wouldn't say that I was surprised at the time, right? But I could see being surprised, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he plays his brother or someone. I think he plays someone else, but he's in the movie, you know, and like that's what I'd seen him in. And you know, more recently, I've seen him in you know, multiple seasons of Narcos Mexico, and like he's just brilliant in that, you know.
Yeah.
And so I believe at that point I guess I'd seen the trailers, but I didn't really like watch the trailers, you know, like they'd been on like while I was doing something else. So like I wasn't like, oh, this is the guy, you know, who's going to be like kind of the second most important character in the movie. I was like, no, it's just someone. He's talking to someone else. Oh, we shot that guy. Okay. So to me, that more like established who he was before I had a kind of preconceived notion of who he might be, you know? And then, you know, throughout, like then he's maybe gonna shoot her dad, right? Which that seems different to me, you know, like they're both questionable, whatever. But it's like I don't know. That other guy seems like not good, you know.
Yeah, like that is one of the things about the movie that never really clicked for me, was like why this guy is so intent on killing a person after they're mostly done building the thing that this person was building.
Right, exactly.
I also don't quite understand how fast X-Wings can travel around the galaxy, but that's also...
Well, that's variable, depending on which, you know, what the screenwriter wants to happen.
But yeah, but I think you're right, that in that situation, like, we as the audience get to see Mon Mothma giving her order, and then that, like, the commander of the military... Like, the way I understand it is she's kind of like the president of the Alliance, and he's kind of like the chief of staff, you know, or something like that. And... you know, Andor doesn't get the order from her. He just gets the order from this guy. And so, yeah, it sucks that he's ordered to assassinate the father of someone who he's literally traveling with. But, you know, sometimes assassinations are like, there's a whole other ethical topic. But personally, I don't know.
Sure, sure.
You know, that's a whole other thing we can get into.
Meta X-Wing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, I think to me that's the whole point, is like meta X-Wing. I like that. Yeah, you just quoted that. Never mind.
I did. Yeah, no, we both quoted it. That's great. What's up?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I just think that's. I think for me, it surprised me not just because of the character, but just because it's Star Wars.
Right. Yeah. I get you.
The first time we'd seen someone kind of pro-rebel doing something underhanded, you know?
Right.
And like. Luke would never do that.
Right,
you know,
but Han would. Han shot first.
Right, well, but that's kind of the weird thing is like, I mean, I guess maybe that's part of why I loved it so much, is it felt like this was Han shooting first again.
Yes.
Even though I think, like, Han, the guy is literally just, not only has he said, I'm going to take you to Jabba, but he actually just says, like, maybe I'll take you in your dead body. I don't think Han shooting first is in any way a problem. It's literally self-defense for him. But even putting that aside, yeah, it just was so out of character for what I expected. I think set the tone for the whole movie.
Right.
And I'm kind of like when, you know, that kind of larger sense of the kind of like war is dirty and war is not as like, you know, pretty as lightsaber battles and stuff like that. Did you also get that sense with Rogue One?
It was fairly limited to that aspect, I think, of the, you know, I mean, the sort of rebellion within the rebellion, you know, definitely makes sense to me. You know, like I feel like, I mean, one of the reasons I think rebellions struggle is that, you know, there's there's one way to keep things the same and many ways to change things. So,
Right.
it's hard to get people really united to change things because people don't all want the same change. But also, like, if people are rebelling, it's like, we talked about this with Twin Sons, with Ezra being like, well, I'm
Right.
not going to, you don't get in the rebellion to follow orders.
Yeah.
If this is a rebellion,
It's a rebellion. I rebel.
Exactly. Which I do not think. I think it's funny. I don't think it's a great line. I do feel like it probably wouldn't have gone great with the what's it called? I don't think it would have gone great with the tone that they ended up with.
Yeah,
and maybe
totally
it's revealing of what the tone might have been, which like does
Right.
it's funny, and in the right movie, I think it could work for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the other thing that for me really added to that tone, and going back to what I was saying about the way World War II versus Vietnam, is those scenes of like the battlefield that they were in. To me, looked an awful lot like the rice paddy kind of battlefields that we see in Vietnam War movies all the time.
Yeah.
And especially like they're U-wings, but like the shots of like the equivalent in that world of helicopters landing and people getting off them.
Right.
And like, to me that, but also, yeah, as you said, like there's the rebellion within the rebellion of Mon Mothma fighting with the chief of staff guy, but then there's also the rebellion versus Saw Gerrera. And like what we see in that the first big battle scene where it's the in I want to say in Fallujah, but because that's what comes to mind, but in Jeddah, where Saw's troops and they're they're fighting Imperials, but they're killing civilians as well, and they're being a little more like kind of out there. And I think at the time I was like, oh yes, clearly like Saw is wrong, Mon Mothma's right. Now I'm like, maybe Saw's the leftist and Mon Mothma's the liberal. Like there's some. Saw's probably too far out there, but there's some you can see at both sides kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
no, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna this whole leftist liberal thing, but like they refer to him as an extremist, I think, right?
Yeah.
Which seems like not the problem, but at the same time, it does seem like they are searching for some sort of somewhat like diplomatic solution, right? Like,
Yeah,
they do believe that they can present evidence of atrocities by the empire and basically get the Senate kind of like to change things. They think that the Senate is still like an effective governing body that just doesn't have as much power as it should. Whereas I think people like Saw are like, no, this whole thing's got to go. It's totally messed up.
And even there, I don't think they're completely. I think there is still some power to the Senate because Vader, they disband it, which obviously is like has some meaning, but also in A New Hope, when they when they capture Leia and keep her, that flunky says to Vader, if the Senate finds out about this, we're going to be in real trouble. So yeah, I think there is some truth to the idea that like they thought the Senate could do something, but that same debate though of like, do we use the vote? Do we use political means to make change? Do we use other means, whether violent or non-violent? Like that's a debate we're having in our own world, And I like that they made it so much more complicated and complex.
Yeah, me too. Mostly, I enjoy it for what it is, and I think it's cool that they have a movie that does that. I also, one of the things I like about Star Wars is most of the time it is like fairly straightforward in a certain way. And like,
that's fair.
The original 3 movies, like I appreciate them on those grounds. I don't need them to be complicated. It's like, I feel like there's room for both. Right.
Yeah.
And Rogue One feels less mythological. Right. Like,
yeah, I think that's exactly what it is. I think Rogue One is the real story that inspires the myth that comes out of it.
Sure. Yeah. That's a way. Sure. Yeah.
And yeah, I think and your comment is totally fair. Like, this is something you and I talked about. You give me a movie or a TV show where every character is shades of gray and no one's really right, no one's really wrong, except they're all kind of wrong, but they all make sense. I'm going to eat up every part of that. And I know often you're just like, give me a good guy to root for, I think that's
just like don't make everybody super dark gray, I guess, if we're going with that metaphor. It's like, or like give me someone likable, and give me some hope. And I think that is actually kind of the essence of Star Wars, really, is that, I think when they were doing Clone Wars, I think, George Lucas said to Dave Filoni, don't forget to give them hope. Kids need hope, or basically that it's like, if it's all just bleak and everybody's horrible all the time, it's like that's not shades of gray anymore. Yeah. That's just some same colored morass. And I
agree with you. Go ahead.
Just to your point of sort of specifically A New Hope and Rogue One, and how Rogue One kind of feels sort of like Vietnam to you, right? The trench scene was modeled directly on a British war film called The Dam Busters that was set in World War II. So,
interesting.
Yeah, okay. So that is actually specifically, the original Star Wars, as much as it's supposedly the Empire is supposed to be modeled after Rome and stuff like that, that scene was based on a World War II movie, a movie about World War II. So.
Yeah, and that's fascinating, because I do think that there is, with now Afghanistan and Iraq, the calculus is changing somewhat, but I think for most, if you ask what is the good American war, World War II is what most people are going to answer. What's the bad American war? Vietnam. Those are kind of often seen as the two poles, at least in our living memory of people who are still alive. And so let's talk about that. Because I totally get you, and I do. Yeah, I find more complexity than some others in those original movies. That sounds super pompous. I don't mean that, but
you think there's more complexity than I think there is or than you think I think there is.
Yeah. Sure. But certainly then I think Matt Carroll and I have argued about this a lot, because he will often say that the original movies, it's all very just black and white ideas of good and evil, and I think it is, but also part of the point is how easily good can become evil or shift and that evil can come back to being good, etc.
Yeah, I agree.
But I totally get your idea of the point, and I think especially as a kid, I love those movies because there's hope, because the good guy wins, and whereas in a show like Daredevil, there's hope, but it is a much darker kind of a show. My sense is though that Rogue One is about hope. It's literally the last line of the movie is hope, but no one lives except the people up in those ships. And I am of the opinion that I think this show is probably going to be, it's going to be about hope, but it's going to be about hope as the candle in the darkness, rather than the great fire of hope that is just over the horizon. Does that, I think that this show is going to be about, I'm imagining that a lot of the show is going to take place kind of around the same time Rebels is happening, or a couple of years before Rebels, when, it does look like most people are on the side of the Empire, and the Empire has all the weapons and all the power, and we've got these people who are struggling to find ways to work together to put this all together, but no one has any idea if this is possible.
I would say I don't want to expect too much, but my sense is more that it would be about finding hope than, an abundance of hope, kind of, about beginning in, which to me is almost more hopeful than just if you're just oh yeah, everything's, it's it's, I would imagine it's starting from a point of sort of a feeling of sort of shared futility of sure, the Empire is horrible, but what can we do about it? Right. We're powerless in the wake of this, monstrous, military. And I would imagine that, it's not going to be, a shining beacon of hope throughout the show, but that I would hope that it's less about, just that, and also, some just logistical, well, we want to rebel in this specific way and change such and such, and how can we go about doing that? I'm almost hoping for a little bit of a burn notice kind of thing, of
I can see that.
situation is bad, a bunch of people have a lot of problems, and kind of trying to do something about it in a situation where that's difficult, right?
Right.
So yeah, I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking, the thing is, you were talking that some part of it may well be about, like, the one person who has hope trying to convince others,
Right.
And we said that Andor, like, even in Rogue One, like, one of the, even in this TV show Star Wars Rebels, one of the main stories of that is people who are just kind of like, either let's just survive under the Empire or let's just sort of poke at the Empire where we can, starting to think that maybe, like, one group starting to convince others that you can have hope that we can do even more. And I could totally see that being a big part of what this is about. I know from books, if I can spoil that, because that's...
Sure, yeah.
like, that some of the more recent books have gone a lot deeper into the political machinations that, like, Mon Mothma and Bail Organa and Padme and others were kind of doing in those last years of... This is going all the way back to the Clone Wars with Padme, obviously, but, like, that Bail and Organa and others, Bail and Mothma and others, were trying to do to kind of, like, pull people together in those discussions of, like, should we be fighting or should we be, just using the Senate, or how do we do those both? And I think I would love I want to see missions. I want to see... I don't want it to be all people sitting around tables. I want to see Cassian Andor getting to do cool Cassian Andor stuff. But I also want that sitting around tables. I want to see those discussions of, like, probably Cassian doing some things that get his hands dirty that, some of the people who are more on the let's talk to the Senate side really don't like, and those kind of dynamics.
Yeah, and I mean, it's 12 episodes or something like that?
There are 2 seasons of it. So 12 episodes now and 12 episodes in, I think 6 months or a year or something like that.
Oh, okay. So there's 12 episodes now. I think 3 come out to begin with, right? And I guess they have a second season planned. So, like, that's a good amount of time. What I hope it's not, like, 12 episodes leading up to finally deciding to maybe get involved in the rebellion, and then, like, there will be 12 episodes, My guess would be they're releasing 3 episodes because not a lot happens in the first 2 episodes. It's like that sort of setting things up slowly, kind of Disney Plus, although that's more the Marvel shows, kind of thing. And then the 3rd episode, it's like, okay, and now we're doing the rebellion. And it's like, all right, I'll come back next week for more rebellion, But yeah, I would like to see some of that sort of, whether it's political or kind of trying to decide, sort of the debate of, like, how to go about things, right?
Right.
I would like to see that as sort of a nice B plot,
Yeah.
With an A plot mostly being, like, missions and, like, okay, we're going to try and do this. But then there's a complication of so-and-so actually would rather you did it like this. And then some kind of tensions there. And, like, maybe some divided loyalties. Like, oh, well, so-and-so said to do this. So-and-so said do this. But actually, I want to do that, And I think that could be interesting.
I mean, I think the way you held up Burn Notice to me, we've talked about this before, but Burn Notice is, to me, I think the best possible melding of episodic television within the frame of a serialized story.
Yeah.
Because, like, every season has an Uber story, but then there's the, like, he's got to pay the bills, so he does private investigator, private save people missions, and sometimes they tie into his main mission, and sometimes they don't.
Right.
I also just think that this is going to be a really fun time to explore because we have explored it in some other ways. And, like, I don't want the whole show to happen on Lothal by any means. Like, I want this to carve out whole new spaces. But, I really love that we're starting to see more of the animated shows, which I think have always been considered, like, kind of the redheaded stepchild of the Star Wars universe being brought in. Like, I wouldn't mind if we see live action, like Ezra's parents in an episode at one point, or, like, some of those kind of things, or, like, some of we hear about, like, someone references that Ghost Crew or Phoenix One or something like that's out there. I'm trying, again, not to build expectations, but I'll say the one theory that I'm hoping for is I feel like someone at Disney realized what utter gold they have found by pulling Tamara Morrison back out of the, like, acting, like, hey, you played this role for us 25 years ago. How about if you do a lot more for us? And he says that like in Rogue One, he says that he's been in this since he was like 4 years old or 8 years old, whatever the number is. We know Star Wars Disney at this point loves flashbacks. I would love to see if we saw like what happened to his family at the beginning, because unless he's a lot younger than Diego Luna looks, that probably happened during the Clone Wars. And I think it would be fun to kind of get to see some of that time period. Again, not even just for the like, I want to see that time period, but just because we've not seen very much that connects the two, that really help. Bad Batch, I think, Bad Batch and Rogue One have both sort of taken the two ends of the spectrum and started to push in from the two directions. And I just want more of that. I want more filling in that time period.
Yeah, I think, I feel like there has to be a like Tamora Morrison cameo in every show, right?
Yeah, I'd be okay with that.
I feel like if this takes place a while before, but then towards the end, it's like if the second season is closer, like maybe we could see someone like Rex, Yeah. There certainly could be, in terms of flashing all the way back. I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah. I mean, I wonder whether they're going to show like kid Cassian Andor. That had to be before the Empire, really, right?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. It would be during, if something terrible happened to his family because of the war, I think it would be during the Clone Wars.
Right. Or even before the Clone Wars, right? In the beginning of the separatist and, movement and whatever. So, which then feels like a little complicated, right? It's like, so then what does he want? Who is he mad at? But,
right.
Was he specific about like something happened to his parents or whatever? Or is that kind of...
I think it was like we've all lost someone, and then I've been in this fight since I was a very young years of age.
Right.
Which made me think, I'm trying to think what gets a 6-year-old into it. Maybe it's your parents do it.
Right.
But like to me, that often means like you're living on your own, something like that's happening.
But is 6 like a number that you kind of just made up, or do you think that's actually close to the number?
I know that it's like I know it's under 10.
Okay, it wasn't like 16. It was like 8 or like...
No. It was definitely like since I was a very small...
Yeah.
Since I was like a shockingly young child.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, then, I mean, that to me would change a fair amount of... Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see. Yeah.
I just Googled it quickly, and it is, the line is, I've been in this fight since I was 6 years old.
Oh, okay, yeah. Huh. So...
Yeah. And I think of him in that movie as being around like mid-20s, late 20s.
No, it's like 30s, easily.
You think so? Okay.
Right?
Okay.
I mean...
then it probably would be pre-Clone Wars, because that movie is taking place 19 years after the end of the Clone Wars.
Right.
So... if he's more like 27, 28, it could be Clone Wars if he's older.
Yeah,
but
I mean, the actor was in his 30s. That's all. Yeah. That's all I know.
Star Wars has certainly fudged some dates along the way.
Yeah, and they just had the easiest out ever. It's just like, space, relativity, just give us a break. And they're like, no, this is the year of this, and it's like, you didn't have to do that. You could have kept it vague. You should have kept it vague. Anyway, calm down. Han shot first. Yeah. Apparently Cisco has a t-shirt that says that on the Flash show, which is
also getting wisdom teeth pulled is kind of sucky. I'm totally very sympathetic to you now.
Yes. Anyway, and we will re-engage with the chat, and if anybody has any questions about the upcoming show that don't involve spoilers, feel free to hit us up in the questions.
Yep.
Where were we? Oh yeah, so in terms of like, I mean, maybe the character's supposed to be in his 20s, and they're just like, it's Hollywood. I did think, I was like, oh, that flashback or the intro, right, which takes place like maybe a decade earlier,
right,
in Rogue One. That actually, it occurred to me this time. I was like, oh, that happens during the Kenobi show.
Does it?
It's like about 10 years earlier, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, maybe it's a little before the Kenobi show, but it's right around the same time.
I guess you're probably right. I thought it was more like 12 years beforehand.
Right. So then it would be 2 years before the Kenobi show. But
yeah, around the same time period.
It's certainly the same ballpark.
Right.
I think I just made it 10 years before because I just made it that in my head, but it's probably not probably not that specific in terms of within the movie. The novelization probably says it was exactly this many years before the Battle of Yavin. And,
yeah. I actually recently read the book Catalyst, which is all about the period from when Jin is. It's about Galen Erso during that period when he's working for Krennic, and Jin is on the run.
Oh, okay.
So and I think that had the exact dates. I don't remember, but I don't want that. That's the kind of thing that I'd rather avoid because it's like then it's like wait, but you said this happened now and this happened now, and like
they're just not that good with that stuff. It's okay. Yeah. At least there's lightsaber fights. Okay, there might not be any in this one, although maybe there'll be some cameos. We'll see, but like it'll be fine.
I have to say, I love the Jedi.
Right?
What?
You hope there's not that we get. Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't mind a cameo. I wouldn't mind a cameo, but I think one of the things that I liked so much about Rogue One was there were no real Force users. There were people who had enough connection to the Force that they were kind of had like low-level superpowers, you know, kind of like Daredevil, you know, especially with the main sort of Force-aligned person who's also blind but clearly able to like be very aware of his surroundings and stuff like that. But even then, they left that really vague as to how much is this the Force, how much is this just him being very attuned to his other senses and being a good fighter. You know, who knows? And yeah, I think as part of it is once a person like turns on a lightsaber, everyone else is going to fade a little bit. Just by quite literally, but like Han. Han and Leia managed to be amazing characters without being Jedi, and Leia got some powers later, of course, but like. I think that's hard to do, and I don't think they've done that very well since. And I think that's why Rogue One I thought was so good, was that it gave us that world without that. And yeah, I think I'm really hoping that we don't get much of the Jedi here. Maybe Kenobi is going to be like pops up once or twice. But even then, no, because so much of it seems to be like, hey, we need to go tell your guy on Tatooine to come out of retirement. What about you? Because I know you love Jedi a lot more than I do. I mean, I love them too, but you're often much happier to see them than I am. Do you want this to be kind of a forceless show, or do you want there to be some of that stuff happening?
Well, I mean, I would say that the Jedi are what's special about Star Wars. I think without the lightsaber, Star Wars is, it's cool. To me, it's the thing that elevates it. And, the Force, not so much specifically the Jedi, but like, yeah, they're space wizards. They're space wizards with lightsabers. That to me is just like, otherwise it could be a lot of different things,
Interesting.
So there's nothing about it being Star Wars that without lightsabers and like using the Force that is inherently interesting to me. I think Andor to me is interesting because I enjoyed the character in Rogue One. I find him intriguing, right? I would say intriguing because I don't know that much about him. I'm interested to know more. Okay, tell me more.
Yeah.
I think Diego Luna's fantastic, and I think Tony Gilroy is a great writer. So you put all those things together. When I first heard they were doing Andor, I was like, okay, that's nice, And then and then it was coming up. I was like, all right, okay. And then I found out like who the showrunner was, and I was like, oh. Okay, it's probably going to be like if it's well written, I don't care that you don't have lightsabers.
Yeah.
I don't care that you don't have Jedi and Force powers, and I don't even care that it is Star Wars. I care that it's well written spy stuff. I'm here for that, and if it's that, awesome. If there's some lightsabers, bonus points. But not necessary. And I do respect the try for like, okay, but how about if we establish that this is totally worth watching without the lightsabers, and then maybe we give you a few lightsabers, Yeah. And I feel like Mandalorian actually did a fantastic job of that, where granted, you got Grogu, you got some Force, right? But you didn't have a lightsaber till like almost like the stinger at the end, practically, right? Like, and Rebels definitely was like, okay, but what if there were some Jedi around? And it's like, it does feel like there aren't, I'm trying to think, is there a season of television or a movie in Star Wars that doesn't have a single lightsaber in it? I'm getting the reaction I was hoping for.
I don't think there is.
Like, it would be Solo, right? But at the end, does like Maul just light up his lightsaber for absolutely no reason? I feel like that happens.
I think Solo would count just as in, like, no one attacks someone with a lightsaber, you know?
Correct. Yes,
and,
yes.
And even there, like, I should also say...
First season, rather, of Mandalorian.
I guess, first of all, I think that's such a fascinating comment you made, because to me, and maybe this is part of why I love A New Hope the most and you love Empire or Jedi the most, to me, it's not... The Space Wizards never caught my attention the way the X-Wing TIE Fighter battles did. Like, those are the scenes... If I really need to watch just 10 minutes of Star Wars, I probably pull up the Death Star trench run, or something like that, or as we talked about on the last episode, Return of the Jedi, which gives us both, like an epic space battle and the Great Wizard battle. So that's a really interesting perspective. But I think to me part of it is that, and again maybe this is my interpretation of the original movies. Part of my understanding of the Empire is that most people probably didn't have the words to understand this necessarily, but on some level there's an understanding of one of the things that makes the Empire so powerful is they have the Force and no one else does. Like, they now have the monopoly on that, Part of what makes Vader so terrifying is that there's no one else with a lightsaber going to fight him again until this kid comes along, and that's what makes Luke so amazing. And and that he's the last Jedi, and that's. I'm not even referencing that movie.
I know.
He's our only hope, etc.
Yeah. No, there is
another. And that's somewhat changed by Rebels, although they somewhat.
No, it all gets yes.
By saying that, I don't mean I'm perfectly I hope he's not the main bad guy, but I'm perfectly fine if Vader turns up in one particular scene, and does Force things, or some of the Inquisitors show up or something like that. But yeah, I kind of don't want our Rebel band to have access to the Force for the most part, because I feel like that, to me, that's such a source of hope. You have just one Jedi, you're in a much, much better place.
Yeah, I agree. I think seeing kind of how the rebellion functioned without any Jedi, which we already know, there's, but they don't all know about Ezra and Kanan, right? So, and Ahsoka, and so I think if seeing that more, I do think that gives some perspective, and I do think that's an interesting story, Just to me, that's not a uniquely Star Wars story. It's a story about a rebellion, and it does fit within the whole timeline and everything, right? But yeah, I mean, just those are the things that really do set it apart for me. I will say, I actually think Vader having a significant presence in the show as a principal villain, or a looming presence, but never using the Force and never lighting up his lightsaber would be way more that would have, really I mean, because he's got the gravitas and he's got the he doesn't need to use the Force, and it's there, he could, but he's this intimidating presence, and I think just having that, you don't see him use the Force in A New Hope until he's fighting Kenobi, right? And even then,
no, because in that first, I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Oh, then you're right. You're right. When he's completely 100%. When he's boarding the rebel ship, though, he doesn't use the Force. He just comes in, he physically lifts someone up with his hand.
Well, because that's when stormtroopers still knew how to fire.
Yeah. That's when they could hit something. Well, they're in a corridor. And everybody's right there. So, no, they don't hit people in the corridor later. Yeah. The first 20 minutes of the movie, that's what Kenobi was referencing in terms of being so accurate.
Well, here's how good aim they have. Them and the, I want to say Andorians, Alderaanians, are both shooting all these laser blasts in this very tight hallway. Yeah. But they all manage to avoid shooting R2 and C-3PO. As they lumber across the hallway.
Yes.
So, all right. I think we're getting a little punchy there, so probably a decent time to wrap up. Any other kind of last comments or big questions that you want to bring up? Or small questions?
No. Yeah?
Okay.
Huh?
Oh, I see what you're getting. Yeah, okay, that was a very simple answer. I get it. I like it. I don't have any either, so this is going to be a good place to call it. So we're going to have a quick discussion after about the going back to that top 3 lists. We have one more top 3 list to give you. Well, we're going to do a bunch more, but we'll get right back to that. But first, Paul, what are you up to these days?
I am doing things as Zen Madman. I've been tweeting and stuff. I'm building some absolutely psychotic plan that I will unveil with more specificity in the future. For now, we're streaming every Wednesday at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. I'm just going to give Eastern time because neither of us live there anymore.
I like it.
So we're going to be doing this, and then we're going to be, I do some poker stuff in the mornings. I guess it's 2 p.m. Eastern time on like Tuesdays and Fridays. Yeah.
Nice.
Generally.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out. I've gotten a lot better at poker watching Paul's stuff. A lot of great stuff happening. And of course, all of my stuff can be found under the name The Ethical Panda. Most importantly, that's the way to give us feedback. Would love to know what you think. What are you excited about? Again, if you don't mind, please no spoilers. Or even if you want to, like, if you send me an email that says Andor thoughts, spoilers in all caps, I'll just be like, cool, I won't open this until I get to that episode.
Yeah.
So feel free to do that, but just please mark it. We don't want to be spoiled. And hope some of you at least enjoyed getting to hear this without being spoiled either. And if you have a lot to laugh at us because you know more things than we do, then again, put that in. Just put a spoiler warning with it. TheEthicalPanda.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, all with that name. Most importantly, TikTok. We're really trying to build the TikTok numbers up, and we're really trying to get people to come to this Twitch. The more people who are in chat, the more we can kind of get involved and have a lot of good discussions. So thank you all so much for being a good audience, and we'll be right back with our stinger after this. All right, so Paul, top 3 audio cues, like top 3 and it can be like just one particular moment of music, or it can be like the music in a scene, but like the top 3 moments where you're like, yeah, that not only like the music brilliant, but like the way the music fits into the scene is just incredible.
1 and 2 are both going to be, the Force theme, basically. The first one from A New Hope, which is my favorite part of A New Hope, is just Luke watching the sun's set. It's, to me, it like establishes the character in a way that no line of dialogue, no facial expression, like no single act of doing a thing could do better or even as well, right? Just like standing there looking out across the sands and seeing the sunset, and the music is just so evocative of basically this sort of sense of like longing and like wanting to do something meaningful, I think. That's I don't know, it's something that I always felt like I related to a lot. And I used to watch that scene in my apartment on like the 17th floor and be able to see out at the sunset over the Hudson, and have like a similar feeling of sort of like, kind of feeling like I wanted to do something that felt meaningful, but being trapped in, in high school or like, some sort of situation where it's like, you can't immediately do the things that feel like they would have the most meaning. That's my number 1.
Okay. My number 1 is, it's a moment we've talked about often on this show, and we really should just memorize what season and episode it is, but it's the episode where, so it must be in season 2, Satine and Obi-Wan have captured this Sith person, not Sith, like a clone leader, and he's kind of mocking them about how...
Separatist leader, right?
The separatist leader, yeah, thank you, is what I meant. They can't kill him because, like, Satine and Obi-Wan each want to believe this of each other, and he's literally like, so what will you do about me? And he literally says, it's like, so who's going to kill me? At which point, Anakin's lightsaber goes through him, and we hear, just subtly, it's not, you kind of have to, like, you pick it out, but the dark side theme for just a few seconds. And it's like, I've said this before, to me, that one moment better explains and shows Anakin's fall to the dark side than the entirety of Revenge of the Sith. It is just such a perfect moment, and the music there is so essential, because I think without the music, you'd been left like, well, yeah, he's killing an enemy leader. Maybe he did the right thing, but he also killed a defenseless person. So I feel like I didn't... One of the things that's always hard for me is when I feel like a character really did something wrong, but I'm not sure that the writer thinks that the character did something wrong. And that music to me was such a good way of being like, yeah, you did just see what you think you saw. But in this subtle way, without Obi-Wan getting upset about it or Satine getting upset about it. They're both just like, that's Anakin being Anakin, which I think is part of the problem of that, you know. But yeah, so that to me is my number one.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite Star Wars moments of all time.
Yeah.
And like 50% of the reason I was like, hey, you should watch the Clone Wars.
Yeah.
You know, was that moment. I was like, oh, this is so much more compelling of a way of, you know, telling this story. And I think there's a couple other times when Anakin does something, which, by the way, I think is totally justified. But, you know, this is, you know, it's Cassian Andor shooting someone in the back because it seems like it's what he thinks needs to be done right then. I really appreciate how understated that moment is. Right?
Yeah.
It's most of the musical, all of the musical cues that I'm going to mention are these very like in your face, this is the music, you know? And that one is not. It's like, it's very light. And I'll give for honorable mention something in the sort of way of that was at the end of episode 4 of Book of Boba Fett. I think it was episode 4. It was either episode 4 or 5. But it was the one just before, you know, they get Mando and they just play like one bar from the theme, you know?
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, that's who's coming next episode, you know? And like that, it's you know, it's like people going crazy for the X-Men theme in various other media, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'll also say,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so I appreciate the subtlety involved in that one.
Very much so, yeah. Like, I think, like, again, if Obi-Wan makes a big deal of it, he says, oh, you're falling to I think it ruins it entirely.
Totally.
You know, I think it has to be that subtle thing.
Yeah.
Also funny, what you said reminded me of something else I'm interested in for Andor, and I think it's a discussion we'll have going forward, but I do think, like, the connection you made to it with Cassian, I think is somewhat intentional. I think part of what this show is going to get into is, are there things that the Jedi can't do but that need to be done?
Right.
Because I have a whole, like, a lot of the stuff that I've been reading, but also just even from the movies and shows, I have a whole thing about, like, maybe Leia didn't become a Jedi because she knew she had to be a politician. And, like, she was like, I can't have the Force because I got to get my hands dirty.
I don't know. I feel like old Jedi mind trick would be super useful in politics. Just saying.
That's fair. That's fair. But anyway, so what's your number 2 moment?
My number 2 is like almost like 1B. It's almost the same as the first one. It is the same music, but with Luke lighting Vader's armor on fire. Whether or not Anakin is in there at that point or not, it's maybe a little unclear. But you know, this sort of like, you know, now the circle's complete, you know, like started off as this, you know, farm boy looking for purpose, trying to do something. And then he did something that was very meaningful, you know, not like, you know, saving the galaxy and whatever, but like, you know, saving his father, you know, bringing him back from the dark side. And this is the kind of like putting to bed of that. And it just also looks really cool. It's this like really powerful visual, paired with this very powerful music. And then the way that gives way, you know, to Yub Nub.
Yeah.
Like it's a really great transition. So that cues another cue, and it's like it's a brilliant end to a movie that apparently George Lucas thought was too good for people to watch and was like, no, I have to ruin this.
Yeah, I feel like we ranted enough about Yub Nub last time that it's only in my honorable mentions, but it's definitely an honorable mention.
Yeah.
My second is one that occurs in almost every movie, but to me it is just so utterly Star Wars. and it's the like that transition from like the end of the like dun, da, da, da,
the 20th century
the kind of like
Fox.
opening or orchestral music,
Right.
and then you get kind of like this moment of silence when it's you know, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, and then you're just hit by the opening, just like ba da da. It is, to me, that is almost as quintessentially Star Wars as what you were talking about with the lightsabers. Which is part of why the first few minutes of Rogue One always throw me.
Oh, right.
Because it's not that. It's just like this just jarring note.
Yeah. It's really weird.
Like,
I just watched it. I was like, what? What is going on? Wait, do they even have an opening crawl? They don't.
I know. I was so upset.
What is this movie?
And I think that worked because I think because it had been so established, it was a great way.
Yeah.
And to me, it's... there's another question that was on TikTok at one point about what's the Star Wars, your first Star Wars memory, really. And to me, the first movie that I remember seeing in a theater was Return of the Jedi. And I was probably like 6 years old. Yeah, I was 83. I was 6 years old. And actually it was 5.
Yeah, you were going to be 6, right?
Yeah. And I remember like the theater I was in New York City. It was not a huge theater. And it was so loud that I felt literally like pressed back into my seat by just the overwhelmingness of that music. Yeah. And it just is, it's just utterly epic in a way that I think it does, like you said, it gives that mythological quality. You know, it's that like, this is not a movie about regular people. This is Star Wars.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, I don't know whether that's the most iconic or the second most iconic music, you know, from Star Wars, right? But it's like, it is just, it hits you right in the face and basically tells you like what you're about to witness, you know?
Yeah.
And my first film memory is also seeing Return of the Jedi, however, at the Ziegfeld, which is the biggest theater in New York. And like, I remember going up the escalators and like, I remember like the feeling of like seeing Luke's lightsaber shoot out of R2. And I mean, I suppose I had seen Empire Strikes Back like on TV or something, but it had come out when I was like 2, you know, and Return of the Jedi had just turned 5. And it was like, I was like, what is going on? You know? And so, and then I needed all of the toys. But yeah, that I mean, is a very powerful piece of music, and the way it's introduced, I feel like that sort of drum roll fanfare thing with like the Fox logo, actually that transition from that to like the first notes of the brass.
Oh yeah,
it's like that is there's something that, because it's like it's already this big fanfare, and then that stops. It's like, no, here's the real fanfare, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly it. It really does sound like an introduction of like, and then literally the fact that it's almost silent when it's a long time ago in a galaxy far away. Because that literally is. It's like, here's the music of right now.
Yeah.
Then we're telling you that we're taking you to this different time and place, and then the music kicks in.
Yeah.
And it's just like... There's a number of people where it's like, I don't think Star Wars becomes what it does if it isn't for this person. And John Williams, to me, is absolutely on that list for that music.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it could be great. It would still be great stories. You know, they'd still look really cool, but the music is what just elevates it to that real like mythological feeling. I feel like, you know, there's plenty of other great musical cues in Return of the Jedi, like when they're dueling and, you know, the kind of like the voices come in, that whole moment is so powerful, and the music there, but to me that doesn't feel like a singular moment. You know, I mean it is, but it's like several singular moments kind of, you know. For me it has to be like the Imperial March, and like probably just the first time you hear it in Empire Strikes Back, you know. The time when it comes in Return of the Jedi also like has this, because now they're like on a new Death Star, right? And like and then the same thing happens, and like the Emperor shows up, but like really just like the first time, just like the Imperial March hits, it's just so powerful, and that theme, you know, which then is termed Vader's theme. Like I actually had the collection, I had the soundtracks, or not the scores. I guess they're scores.
Yeah, there's like a 4 CD set that was like every music ever played. And
yeah, and I used to have that. I don't, unfortunately, anymore. And I had some like mashup before mashups were a big thing of like playing like the Godfather theme, like guitar solo over the Imperial March. It was super cool, but I never recorded it.
Nice.
but yeah, it just like the Imperial March is just amazing, and like pretty much every time it shows up, it's great. But like sort of the first time when it's just like first like, it's showing you, I feel, the sort of scope and the feel of the Empire in a way that I feel like A New Hope only kind of like alluded to.
Yeah.
And then
it's funny.
makes it like
that same piece of music is my number 3 as well.
Okay.
But it's the other time you mentioned it. For me, it's in Return of the Jedi. It's that like, because that we saw the Emperor briefly, but only as a hologram that Vader was talking to, and then that scene, and it's not just that it's him. It's that like the soldiers are lined up to greet him, and they do the kind of parade march thing where they all like move their guns in the exact same moment, and it gave you an idea, like exactly what you said, not just the scope and size of the Empire, but just like the professionalism, the rigidness of like, this is not a ragtag bunch. This is a group of, you blew up our Death Star? Fine. We're going to build another one. Like this is the might of the Empire. Yeah. And I just, I can't even quite picture what moment is it in Empire that they first play the march?
I think they're just showing like the fleet, and I think that's where they first show Vader's command ship, which is like, you've seen the Star Destroyers in A New Hope, and they're huge. Yep. And then here you see the Star Destroyers, and they're these like little things next to like Vader's command ship, right? So it's like, it's showing this scope in that way. And I think then you see Vader like on the ship. Maybe that's when the music comes down a bit. But yeah, I was deciding between that and yours. So like, I'm glad I picked the one so that you could pick the other, But like, I'm with you there. Like that's maybe actually a better one. But I also kind of wanted one from each of the movies. So yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, am I the only one who went outside the original trilogy?
Yeah. I just picked one from each of the first 3 movies.
Yeah. But and I'll say,
I co-signed
like,
all of yours and had an honorable mention.
Yeah.
Of which there are too many. Like
the Anakin one, I think, is the best. But like, one thing I really appreciate with both Clone Wars and Rebels, we call it fan service now when like you reference an earlier property in the newest property. And I think it can be, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but I think also it can be like, no, this is a very important way of like tying these stories together. And I feel like in Clone Wars, but especially in Rogue One, there are just so many times where they use music so well to kind of help you connect what's happening here to what happened in the movies that you've seen. And like that one moment from Clone Wars is so good. I think there's probably 5 or 6 others from Clone Wars that are amazing. There's a bunch that are just so good in Rebels. And so like to me, I didn't want to do 2 of them because they're similar, but like the Anakin one is the top, but like they all get honorable mention.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think like when like in Obi-Wan in one of those things, and there's I'm with you on that. I wouldn't consider that fan service. I feel like, and I don't think fan service necessarily even has to be used in kind of like a sort of dismissive fashion, but to me it's like that's an integral aspect of connecting these things, and it really makes them live in the same universe in a way that they wouldn't without. And I'm curious, like, so Mandalorian like actually I think came up with new brilliant themes. And then Book of Boba Fett, I think, also came up with great themes. And, like, they had that whole, like, Dark Trooper dubstep thing in Mandalorian, Yeah. So it's like they really have continually just gotten great music and added new themes while also carrying forward, the previous themes. I'm really curious, like, what did they do musically in Andor, Yeah.
Like, I'll be curious. Like,
I don't know.
Rogue One had some interesting themes. I think the clones have some interesting music themes that could come in if we go to that period. I think there's definitely, like, kind of some of the hopeful music in not necessarily the Force connected music, but just some of the other stuff will definitely be a part of it. So we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. All right. Well, thank you so much, Paul. This was awesome. Thank you again to everyone who's listening. Hope you really enjoyed this. Let us know what you think, and most importantly, as fans, be excellent to each other.